ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This week, we are talking Dan Trachtenberg's Prey.
Hey, but before we talk Prey, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, be a great favor to us if you went ahead and hit that subscribe button. Even now, won't cost you a cent. It would be a great favor to us. And just as a reminder, Deep Dive Movie Reviews does contain spoilers, so you have been warned. James, let's talk Prey.
Okay, so Prey is a movie that pretty much kind of came out of nowhere and sort of announced itself as the new installment in the Predator franchise. And I think just as recently as a few months ago, no one even knew that this movie was being made.
Yes.
And then it was announced that something was going to come onto Hulu or Disney Plus, depending on where you are. And there was talk that it was originally going to be a TV show, or nobody knew. And it turns out that it is a whole new prequel to the Predator franchise. This is set in Comanche Nation, early 18th century America.
Yes.
And we follow Naru, played by Midthunder, who is a young Comanche woman in the tribe. Because she's a girl, she's not really allowed to become a warrior, but she's supposed to sort of stay at home with her mother and with the other woman and look after the camp and what have you. But she's pretty determined that this is what she's going to do. She wants to fight alongside her brothers and the other young men in the tribe. And there's talk that there's like a mountain lion or that there's something out there in the woods that is threatening them. There's also a sighting of something that they refer to as a thunderbird, which we already know is actually a Predator spaceship that has dropped off its own sort of adolescent warrior in the making for his rite of passage. If you're familiar with the Predator franchise, you know that these are kind of tests for the Predators themselves. These are a kind of rite of passage for them. And so this is what's happening. Naru, the girl, is undergoing her own kind of rite of passage, and sooner or later they're just going to go head to head in the forest. But they're not alone. There's also sort of French trappers and hunters there who present a very different kind of threat. You know, they're skinning the buffaloes, they're raping and murdering any of the tribesmen they find. I think there's a sort of slavery element to it going on as well. Yeah. And so that just adds a kind of another element to the threat that is under there. But by the third act, for sure, you get a good old Predator third act where it's mano-a-mano, or in this case, your Predator against a young Comanche woman who is desperate to prove herself to the tribe, while there still is a tribe to prove herself to. So, Steve, what did you make of this one?
Yeah, I had no idea this movie was coming out. I was as surprised as anybody. And to see it come out on, I think, Hulu in the States, Disney Plus for us here in Hong Kong, suddenly popped up. If I have one critique, it's too bad. We watched it as a family yesterday with my daughter and her boyfriend and my wife, and we kept saying, it's such beautiful cinematography. These vistas where they've shot this, you know, the American West of a certain time period with the mountains and the rivers and the streams and the broad spectrums. It had that Power of the Dog feel to it.
Right.
And I think, like we said in that review, that's a movie that really should have been viewed on the big screen. And if I have a critique, it's not seeing or having the option of being able to see this on the big screen. Having said that, if you're going to do a Predator sequel, and the sequels have been done, this is the way to do it. It's a really interesting concept. What else after you've had Arnold Schwarzenegger and then an alien to fight? The other Predator sequels where they just fought other humans were largely misses because, you know, it's kind of hard to reinvent the success of the things that really work. They needed to come up with a concept that was going to completely be radically new. And to have it go 300 years in the past and have it be Comanche warriors fighting the Predator, absolutely brilliant idea. And it totally worked in this film. I'm somebody who watched the original Predator film in the cinema. I saw Arnold, I saw Jesse Ventura, I saw Carl Weathers. My brothers and my friends, we used to, you know, when we greet each other during a time period after, we'd lock arms and go, oh, they got you pushing too many pencils. You know, we would.
Bitch. What's the matter? The CIA got you pushing too many pencils?
We do the Arnold lines, and we would quote lines from Predator. You know, having said that, there's elements of this film that don't rise to the original because there's some things that can't be recreated. But if you're not going to be able to be as good as the original, this film comes damn close.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I want to get it out of the way. The original Predator is one of my favorite movies. It's just great. I was a huge Arnold Schwarzenegger fan back when I was a kid, and this was one of my favorites and remains it. It's so lean, so economical with its idea. You know, it's just a bunch of special forces guys, you know, stuck in the jungle. No one knows they're there, and then there's also an alien there, and it proceeds to pick them off one by one, and that's about it. And it forces them to put down their guns and, you know, take up a more primitive tactic, if you like, and it's one-on-one, and it's great stuff. The sequels, I've always found something to like in most of the sequels. Predator 2, I think, is it's simultaneously the one that the punching bag, the one that everyone's like, well, it's not the first one, but I think it's kind of really fun. It's Danny Glover. It's in
Danny
LA.
Glover, I remember that. Yes,
it's too hot. I think it tries to recreate too many specific beats from the first one. I think that's the kind of the problem. But you've got like Gary Busey being absolutely crazy, Bill Paxton, Maria Conchita Alonso, and all of these kind of character actors that you were used to seeing in these 80s sci-fi action movies. And I think there's a lot to enjoy.
Yeah,
Ruben Blades is in there as well. I think there's a lot of great stuff. And then,
you know,
Adrian,
I've poo-pooed that one for years, but just as you read out that cast again, I'm immediately thinking I need to revisit that film.
You do. I mean, it is great, and it was always the best sequel.
Okay.
And they're all there on Disney Plus now, so you can do a big sort of Predator marathon. And it was something I was gonna do, and then I never got around to it before this one came out. But then they got the Predators, which is the one that happens in space on the Predators planet with Adrian Brody in it, and he's got some fun ideas in it, but it's just a bit kind of run of the mill. And then the recent one with Shane Black directing, you know, everyone was like, oh, Shane Black, okay, it's going to be something exciting. He's going to sort of reinvent it.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of more of the same. And you're just kind of, you're like, okay, never mind. And then the less said about the Alien versus Predators movies, the better. You know, I don't think they're any good at all. So the genius of this film, Prey, is the simplicity of it. They're like, well, let's just take any situation we can, make that its own thing, make an authentic representation of a particular world. The fact that it is a kind of warrior community only accentuates the situation, and then just drop a predator in the middle of it. And it's such a great idea because there've always been little Easter eggs, little suggestions throughout the franchise. The Predators have been doing this for a long time. You know, there's actually a moment in this film that explains a similar kind of Easter egg moment in Predator 2. There's a moment at the end of Predator 2 when Danny Glover's wandered through the alien spaceship and seen, among other things, an alien skull, and that was the big kind of gag. It's like, oh yeah, look, there's a you know, they've been hunting the xenomorphs from Aliens. When the Predators decide to kind of leave him at the end of the movie, and they're not going to kill him, and you know, he's a worthy adversary or whatever, one of them tosses him something, and it's a musket, and it's got the engraving on it, and it's the same musket that you see in Prey that the Predator gets hold of it. Yeah, it's a pretty deep cut, but, but you're kind of like,
that's great. I have to go back and watch. Now that you say that scene, I remember that scene, but it's been years since I've watched that movie.
Yeah, and so you're watching Prey, and you're like, oh, that's not just any gun. That's the gun that he would then give Danny Glover 300 years later. And so that was kind of fun. And what I liked about it is beyond that, there aren't too many attempts to recreate certain, you know, scenes that we know and love, which is, I think, is always the danger of any kind of like reboot or what have you. I remember there's one line where the brother says to Naru, "If it bleeds, we can kill it."
And that line was in this.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So that line from the original Predator.
I enlightened everybody in my living room that's from the original
like, film. Oh, you're like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's watching TV. It's like, oh, that's the thing. But beyond that, I think it was confident enough to do its own thing, and also confident enough for its own thing to be, let's just make a Predator movie. You know, let's just hunt each other down.
Yeah, you know what was fun to watch too is watching the more primitive Predator too. I mean, obviously he had his advanced tools, but he didn't have the advanced armor that a Predator would have in 300 years. The tools were more of a projectile nature than the laser. It was definitely, the Predator was also operating at a reduced tech level. And even by the mask that it had, you know, it's to see those dynamics at play was fun to watch as somebody who's been part of the franchise for, you know, 35 years now, I think. You know, what worked in the first movie was a hell of a lot of testosterone. And obviously in this,
hell of a lot of what?
Testosterone, you know.
Testosterone.
What
testosterone. I don't know what you said, but it was wrong. Testosterone.
Testosterone. Okay.
Yeah.
Testosterone. Testosterone. I feel like George W. Bush. I just make up words. What I loved in this is they didn't try to recreate, you know, this 80s film that's full of testosterone. You know, that the Comanche are obviously very adept, you know, at warfare, but they didn't have a lot of the Arnold, Jesse Ventura, Carl Weathers, little boys thing going. They went in a whole different direction that worked for the Comanche setting and worked for the tension between obviously that's something that is still a patriarchal system trying to recognize this sister who has that warrior spirit in her, and watching that dynamic play out, it just made for something fresh for the franchise, and it worked in this movie.
Yeah, I like it. And you know, it is also a family as well, and I think that you had seen a little bit of that in one of the older films. I think the last one has sort of a kid in it, and the second Alien versus Predator movie has a family being attacked, but but there was no dynamic, you know. There was no sense of this is a cell, this is a community. I like that this was like a microcosm, and they went the extra yard to make it feel authentic and believable, and that there was a hierarchy, but yeah, it was a relatively flimsy one.
Yeah,
it could be negotiated because they were a family.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah. And so I really appreciated that. I really liked the way that she pushed back against her brothers and the other guys. You know, she wasn't going to take no for an answer. She didn't know her place, or rather she had no interest in knowing or recognizing where they felt her place should be. I love the fact that from the very beginning, what we see, not only is she out on her own training herself to be a better warrior anyway, but she's innovating. You know, she's got that tomahawk on a string thing.
Yes,
you know, that's clearly just something that she's come up with, you know, in order to sort of retrieve it back again.
And it saved her life. And,
of course. I mean, it's wonderful foreshadowing in terms of the movie structure, but it just shows her up to be someone who can adapt and think on her feet, because we know it's a Predator movie that is what will be required of her. Come the big showdown.
I will say, I watched this with my daughter and her boyfriend and my wife, and at the beginning, or near the beginning, when the trap is revealed, there's obviously a metal trap that catches I think the dog at first. What's the first thing they caught? I think it's the dog. As soon as I saw the trap and she's looking at the trap going, what is this? I said to everybody, I said, okay guys, just letting you know, I don't know what's happening in this movie. I have no foreknowledge of anything. But seeing that trap, I'm telling you, there's going to be some really nasty white people, and they're going to die nasty death. And they just started laughing. And it sure as enough, as soon as the French traders came up, you're going, oh, they're going to die, man.
Well, I just love how the trap is used.
Yes.
You know, when he gets picked up and he's like swinging it around. It was
it was fun watching, you know, in the original Predator, up until Arnold at the end, Predator is by and large just picking them off one by one without narrow fight at all. At one point they clip him, and you know, if it bleeds, it can kill it. But by and large, even these big special forces guys were not able to do anything really to this predator. Where in this film, what I enjoyed was there was a lot more battle between the Comanche and even the French traders and the predator. The predator was very powerful, much more powerful than them, but there was times when they almost got the upper hand on the predator. And that made for a more interesting dynamic to the film, I thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's just another example of how they took the franchise and they actually developed it and evolved it. And this wasn't just a retread of the first movie, albeit in Native American garb, if you like.
Yeah.
It was doing something else. I like that they have at times tried to do subtle things with the character, the predator character itself. Right. So to show it up to be an individual, in this, I like the like we mentioned the more primitive aspects to the to the weaponry and what have you, but also this willingness to kind of go in for hand-to-hand kind of combat, the way that he has more rudimentary weapons, but more weapons. He has that shield that he also uses as a kind of bladed weapon at times as well. I thought that was really sort of interesting how they did that, and I liked how gnarly it got. It doesn't hold back. It remembers why its audience is here. We appreciate all of the period specific detail and what have you, and the respectful representation, but we want to watch everybody die at the end of the day, that except the dog. And as soon as I saw there was a dog in this movie, I was like, oh no. You better not. But I thought the dog was pretty great.
It's like the cat in Alien. She's Sigourney Weaver and that cat's going with her, Yeah. So what do we think about the cast, James? Amber Midthunder, I think fairly new. I was unfamiliar with her, although I'm checking her Wikipedia. Obviously, she's not a complete newcomer.
No.
And obviously some Native American heritage as well as some of the other cast.
I mean, I am familiar with Amber Midthunder. I saw her in a Liam Neeson movie a year or two ago called The Ice Road. I know that she's a big part of the TV show Legion, but I haven't seen the TV show Legion, but I understand that she's the lead or one of the leads in that. But beyond that, I didn't really know anybody else in this. I didn't recognize anybody, but I thought that she was great, because she is a young actress, and I felt that she held her own and she held the movie up. The movie is so much about her, and it wouldn't have worked had she been just a little bit more dull or what have you. And I thought she was incredibly engaging. There's not a lot of dialogue she has to fall back on.
It's a lot of visual. It's a lot of action without a lot of little dialogue between her and her brothers, but that's about it.
And that's hard to be, to give that kind of sort of compelling performance on screen when you're not saying anything.
Right.
Because it's always the easiest crutch in any performance is dialogue. It's like, well, I'll just say this and wave my hands around. But if you've got nothing to say and you're just wandering through the forest, or you're, with your dog, or you're making weapons or making a fire or whatever it is you're doing, and to make that compelling, that's not so easy. And she does a great job of just, giving you something to watch, essentially.
Let me ask you, I think I originally heard your review on RTHK, and you said something about Prey, about it being offered in both Comanche and in English. And I tried here at Disney Plus, and there was about 8 languages I could watch it in, but Comanche wasn't one of them. And we actually put it into another language initially, thinking, well, we don't really know Comanche. Let's choose another language we don't know and pretend it's Comanche. But then that didn't quite work, and we ended up shifting back to just English. I would have liked to know what the experience would have been like if they hadn't been speaking English, if they had been speaking Comanche.
Okay, so this is what happened. This is the situation, and there's been a bit of sort of miscommunication about exactly what they did and what they didn't do. So I think the idea originally is that they wanted to shoot the whole thing in Comanche, and then they realized, well, I think probably Disney or whoever was paying for it was just like, don't do that. We're not going to pay for that. If you get to make your Predator movie, fine, but you got to do it in English. So I think the idea was the director has referred to what he called the Hunt for Red October device, If you remember that movie, it starts off they're speaking Russian, and then I think the camera just kind of zooms in to Sean Connery's mouth, and it just changes. And then it pulls out and he's speaking English, and we're like, okay, he's speaking Russian, but he's speaking English, and everybody just speaks English for the rest of the movie.
There's been Nazi movies done like that as well.
Yeah, Valkyrie, I think with Tom Cruise did that.
I think that's a yes. I was trying to think which one, but it's
I think that was Valkyrie. The one. And so I think that was the idea. And if I remember rightly, the film does start, and the first couple of lines of dialogue are in Comanche, and then they just switch over to English. So by about 5 minutes in, they're all speaking English, but you get the idea that they're speaking Comanche, but there isn't a kind of gimmicky moment. However, what they have done and what they have made available is that they then recorded a dub track. They got all the original cast, or as many of them who were able to do it, to record their lines again in Comanche. So it is there. Unfortunately, it's not where you would think it would be. Because that's what I did. I went and looked for it, and if you select the languages, I was looking for Comanche, and I was like, it's not there. But the PR from Disney was like, oh yeah, we're using, because I was like, oh, maybe Hong Kong didn't bother. But I asked Disney, I was like, have you done the Comanche version as well? Is it available? And they're like, yes, it is there. But what it is when you've got your Disney Plus portal or your platform up, it's not under the languages, but where you've got the movie details, and then it says extras. It's under the extras. If you hit the extras tab, there's like the trailer, and then underneath it just says Prey Comanche version. And so you have to pick it as if you're picking like a special feature rather than under the language tab.
I wish that had been more apparent, because we would have liked to have watched it in Comanche. I had no idea.
I mean, admittedly, it's a dub. So, they're not speaking Comanche.
The lips are going to be.
So, although I watched a little bit of it, and it looks like they've done a pretty good job of trying their best to match the lips, even though they're not saying the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no.
Like these would do in old like spaghetti westerns. They would kind of try.
I've done some voiceover work before. Yeah, I know, or some not translation, but. I've done some Chinese movies into English for
nice.
You're trying to match the lines to the actual speaking.
So it is there. You can find it. That's where it is. I was actually going to try and watch it again in Comanche ahead of doing this, but I ran out of time. Yeah, but I want to go check that out for properly, because I think that's a really great sort of idea, and you need to sort of support that kind of idea. Because I do appreciate the lengths that the film has gone to ensure that it is authentically represented on screen as best they can. I believe one of the producers is Comanche, and I think that they were kind of on hand quite specifically to just sort of check everything. And I think as many of the cast as possible are either Native American or First Nation or whatever. I think Amber Midthunder is Sioux Indian rather than Comanche, but though what are you going to do?
Yeah. So James, just drawing it to a close, we've got a score to do for Prey. What should we do? I'm going to suggest maybe tomahawks.
That works for
I
sure.
think I need that can be our measuring tool. Why don't you start us off? What was your how many tomahawks out of 5 will you give Prey?
Okay. I mean, I really like this. I'm a fan of the franchise, but I understand that pretty much all the sequels in the franchise have problems. There has never been a sort of a great Predator sequel. And then this comes along, and I was like, oh, this is a great Predator sequel. This is what a Predator sequel should be. This is what they should be doing with the franchise. As I alluded to at the beginning, you just need to create a world authentically and then drop a Predator in it. I think if they're going to continue making Predator movies, that's how they should make Predator movies. Do like a 1930s gangster movie, drop a Predator in it. Because they're supposed to be attracted to heat and conflict, I believe is what they've said in past movies. So any kind of war zone. I like the historical aspect of it. I think that they've never done that before, but I think that's a great way of essentially going, well, let's just make any movie you want. Can you imagine like Bridgerton with a Predator in it? Or something like that. Any kind of conflict, something on the high seas. Yeah. It would be an incredibly expensive movie, but with a Predator, I think there's so much scope, and I think that this is a really effective, modest, but respectful and effective way of doing this kind of movie. I thought it was great. I think Amber Midthunder is an excellent lead. Like I said, I think she really holds your attention. She really goes convincingly toe to toe against the Predator, and it's in and out in like sort of 95 minutes. It knows what it is. It doesn't try to be Pocahontas as well or anything like that.
Right.
It's like no, we know what you're here for. You're here for a Predator movie. We're going to give you a Predator movie, and that's what I was here for, and it delivered. I'm going to give it 4 tomahawks out of 5. It did the job.
Yep, you read my mind. I came into this film with mixed expectations, but hearing good things, and I feel exactly the same way. I thought Amber Midthunder did a wonderful job. I think anytime a girl or a woman trying to prove herself in a man's world can overplay itself, it can in trying to prove herself, you lose something, and you actually diminish yourself in your attempt to show that you're as good as the boys. And she just exudes such a confidence and a genuine love for her brothers. There's antagonism, but it's a loving antagonism. And so I thought that element worked really, really well. You brought up the whole dynamic of the family. So I just thought, again, this is a really well done sequel in a franchise that struggles with how it wants to do its sequels. You got me already thinking now where to drop a future Predator. I almost want to ask our listeners, please put in the comment box below, where would you want to see in time period, in culture, a Predator dropped in? But I'm going to mimic your 4 tomahawks. That's exactly what I'm going to give it. This is a very, very good addition to the Predator franchise.
Damn right. Excellent. Yeah, and just to echo your thoughts, yeah, I want, that's exactly what I wanted to ask our viewers as well. Yeah, where would you see it? Which time period? Which country?
Boy, that's really got me thinking now. That's got me.
Well, let's spitball some ideas and then pitch them to Disney. So,
oh, you know what would be interesting? You know, the whole idea of like enemy mine, where 2 enemies have to come together to fight a mutual enemy. Can you imagine, like, the thought that just came into my mind is you drop a Predator right in the Zulu Wars, and you take a British young officer who is trapped with a Zulu, and they are fighting each other, and they have to come to a trust for another and to overcome and beat the Predator.
Beat the Predator. They actually do something kind of similar to that in Alien versus Predator, when there's a degree of respect between the human characters or the last survivor and the Predator. And they use the line, my enemy is my friend.
My friend, yeah.
And so they kind of have a truce, because they both realize, okay, well, we've got to get rid of these aliens or overcome these aliens first. And so there's a little bit of that, but yeah, works in a slightly different way. I think they both acknowledge that the aliens are the real evil.
The real evil, yeah, indeed. Well, hey, that's our opinion. Let us know what you think in the comment box below. And as always, if you want to follow James and I on social media, you can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram, and those details are in the section below. James?
All right, yep, that's it. So until next time, let us know with all your fascinating Predator sequel, prequel ideas, and we will see. You ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.